Hi, I'm Heidi. Thanks for joining us for another conversation on hope. I'm here with my dear friend Jill, and we're just going to jump right in for the sake of time. But Jill has an amazing story, an incident that happened about 18 months ago, if I'm remembering correctly. Then
16 maybe.
16 months ago, that really kind of shattered your world and your faith. So let's jump in and tell us what happened.
Well, we had a camp out, a family reunion the 1st of July, the first weekend in July, which we always go. We got there camping, and my son and my daughter and all my 3 grandsons were there the night before. They were excited when we got there on Friday, and we all went for an ATV ride and had a lot of fun that day, and we laughed and giggled, and we came back and we're all sitting around, and we had something to eat, and Tommy decided to take his friend for a ride on his Razor. Well, his 4-year-old son wanted to go. Well, my daughter's youngest, he was 8 at the time, they were inseparable. So they both jumped in the Razor, and he had this seat made for them that had a row bar and seat belts. So they took off, and Tommy just tore out like he always does, and I yelled at him, "Tommy!" And he's just laughing like he always does. Great big strong man that always had control.
And he was
35
at the time. Okay.
35. Well, pretty soon they were gone, and I was standing around and I was getting really worried. And I really had a worried feeling in my heart, and I kept saying, "I'm getting really worried. I'm getting really worried." And my daughter said, "Mom, Tommy won't let anything happen to those kids." I said, "I know that, but I'm really worried." So a few more minutes, I looked at my nephew Wes and I said, "Wes, do you think he's okay? Because I'm really, really worried." By then I was just getting sick inside. Wesley says, "Jill, I think he's okay. He's been up there 100 times. And I said, "Okay." And I'm just sitting there really worried. And Wesley's nephew jumps on his bike and he takes off. And I looked at him, I said, "He's worried too. Good, he's gonna go find Tommy." He came back on his bike with the 2 boys, and he said, "Call 911. I already knew in my heart what had happened. I asked Russ to take me to him. We drove forever, but we didn't have the heart to go look at him. Anyway, they did confirm that my son had been killed on that ATV that night. And I didn't know how life could go on. Everyone else was safe. We got back off the mountain and we came down. His little boy, he was fine. Carol's little boy was fine, and the other guy was fine. And that's when our devastation and our world was crushed.
Tell me, you mentioned Tommy would never let anything happen to those boys. So tell me a little bit about what you were told, because he really had their safety top of mind when they were out on the mountain, a mountain he'd been on millions of times before, and your family's a big outdoor family, so this was nothing new to Tommy. He was very comfortable, probably more comfortable in the mountains than anywhere else.
He was.
So, but the love he had for those 2 little boys. So tell me kind of what happened and how he protected those 2 babies.
Well, he was coming up through these hills, and he would go over these big logs. And he'd gone over this log, and the bike tipped over. And his little boy and my other little grandson was in it, but they were safe. He had made sure they were safe, that it had the row bar and the seat belt. And Tommy had his seat belt on, and his friend had the seat belt on. They got out of the bike, and they took the bike back up, got the 2 kids out, And their friend, Dustin, he got the kids and they came walking up around when Tommy, he just jumped back in his bike. He only had 2 more logs to go over. And he said, let me just get it up here and then I'll catch right up to you right over here by this, right up the hill. Well, when Dustin walked down, the bike was tipped over and landed on him. He had hit his head and he didn't put his seatbelt back on. And it spun around and it threw him down and the bike landed on his chest and it suffocated him. So then we called for help and they had to work many men to get that bike off of him.
Wow.
It came up and hit against a tree and it pinned him. Otherwise, had the tree not been there, the bike would have kept rolling and it wouldn't have suffocated him. But it hit that tree and that tree is got a scuff mark out of it, but that's where his friends, his nephews, cousins went a few days later and got his bike out and they hung a most amazing memorial. They made him a plaque. They had 2 beautiful horns hung in that tree and then an arrow with all our names drilled into the tree, and that's where we go to give ourselves some peace, to go back to see where Tommy laid rest up in the mountains. So as the little boys were coming down the mountain, it was getting dusk, and my little 8-year-old, he was really scared. This is the story that Dustin told us, because he was a big guy like my son. He was big, 6'4", big man, big strong man. And he was carrying Stetson, and Archer was, he was really scared. Are we gonna be okay? Are we gonna be okay? And Stetson, he points down the mountain, he said, yeah, we're gonna be okay. Follow my daddy. There's my daddy. And he said, I smell my daddy.
Wow.
And that story, I didn't know it that night. It was days later when I heard that story, but that was the most precious story out of a little angel, his little angel. He made sure they got off that mountain safely.
Wow. That's pretty special.
It is.
Pretty special for a little boy to have that connection with his father,
Mm-hmm.
that he could see him. And again, his safety was the top of Tommy's mind, even after Tommy had passed.
He made sure he got down off the mountain.
Yeah.
And since then, Stetson would come to our house, and me and Russ were sitting there one day, and he patted one of our bar stools. He says, Daddy's sitting right there. And I said, he's sitting right there? He says, yeah, he's in shorts. And I said, how lucky. You get to see your daddy? He said, yeah. I smell Daddy.
Oh.
And me and Russ just looked at each other with tears on our eyes and went, wow, he is seeing his daddy.
They say the veil is very thin.
Yeah.
Very thin.
How lucky.
Very lucky.
I've had some great experiences since Tommy has passed. Tommy has held my hand, and he stood by my side while I cried in bed. I was reaching up for him so I just needed him. He held my hand in that sky for probably 45 minutes, and he would answer my questions. He told me he was okay, but his hand stood still when I asked him if he was happy. He could never tell me he was happy. So somehow, I don't still think that he's happy, because I don't know how he could be.
Right.
He left his family and his little boy, his dad, his sister, his mama. He didn't want to go.
But do you think that, well, you've shared some stories with me, but you had premonitions that night that something was wrong that afternoon. But that wasn't the only time
Right.
that you've had this worry, this anxiety about your son and his safety. So
Yeah.
and some mothers will say that, some parents will say they feel something, or they always, sense something is off. So talk to me about kind of, when he was little and as he got bigger, and some of the experiences that could have been devastating at the time
Yeah.
that weren't.
I've always had a special feeling with Tommy, and I've just always been extremely extra worried. And then when him and my nephew went without permission and got bullet bikes, me and his dad just about had a heart attack. I was so sick inside. I thought, this is when I'm gonna lose my son. Every day at lunch, I went out to my ride and sat in my car and I cried and I prayed to God every single day, please don't take my son. Well, I got that phone call. He wrecked his bike before he even made a payment. He totaled it. He walked away. I thought, oh my gosh, Tommy, have you had enough? Well, he got the settlement check, ran right out, got the exact same bike.
Oh, heck no, he hadn't had enough.
No, I told him I've had enough. I can't take this. Well, I did the same thing. I prayed every day and I cried. I cried and cried, and I begged God not to take my son. And he did it again. He wrecked. He totaled that bike, and he had a gal on with him, and he hurt the girl. He had to have some knee surgery, but that's all. He finally decided, okay, that's enough. I said, for someone to live through one accident and total a dirt bike, one of those bullet bikes, and live through it, and now you've lived through two, I thought, wow, thank God it wasn't Tommy's time to go. And I've had these feelings that I was going to lose my Tommy. And as time went on, I was always very worried. I always told him, I said, Tommy, I worry so much about you. Please be safe, because I can't live without you. And he said, I know, Mama, I know.
And he worked in a kind of a high risk job too,
Right.
wasn't there some?
Yes, he worked knee case and sun masonry with his pa. He was very, very proud of that. They were on a job working with another contractor, and the wind was blowing hard that day. And Russ, his dad, my husband, was on the other side. And the wind blew, and this really tall scaffolding came down. Russ was scared to death. He went running over because Tommy, our son, was over on the other side. He thought, we've just lost Tommy. He went running around to the other side, and Tommy somehow, in a split second, jumped down off the scaffolding as it was falling and had a second to jump underneath the forklift. And the scaffolding landed on the forklift, and it didn't kill him.
Wow.
Russ thought then we lost Tommy. And so, and then Tommy's had fast bikes, four-wheelers, and I've always worried. And then he got this razor, and he rolled it down the sand dunes, but his seatbelt was on. He rolled it, endoed, and he came out just fine. I thought, oh my gosh, this kid. So I think he thought he was invincible. And I just still had these very scared feelings of losing him. And it wasn't 2 weeks before he died, I was standing in the backyard, and the sickest feeling came over my body. And God told me, he just took Tommy. And I just stopped and I just bawled. And I said, please don't take him. Please take me, but don't take my son. I said, please don't take my son. And I told Russ later, I said, I had the worst feeling today. God told me he took Tommy.
And this was 2 weeks prior to the accident.
Before Tommy died. And then he did take him. So I've always known deep down that I was going to lose my son. And I did. And life is very difficult. And it's very hard to live through as a parent, losing your child, and the devastation that you feel every day and night, and the devastation that I know my husband feels. He worked with Russ every day, his dad, and he was taking over the business, and Russ's whole world changed from that night forward. His sister's life has changed forever. His nephews and his son, I feel so bad his son doesn't get to grow up and hunt with his dad and do all the things that his dad loves.
So what gets you through that painful feeling? What's gotten you through the last 16 months?
Well, I'll tell you, I love my husband and my daughter. She needs us, and our 3 grandkids. It wouldn't be fair to them. And I know they need us to be happy and to carry on and put one foot in front of the other, which is very hard when all else fails and you don't want to, you know you have to. And they give me the strength. I have to get up and put one foot in front of the other. But also one other thing that I do want to mention is I have friends that have been there for me that have experienced the same thing that I've experienced, not in the same way, but a parent losing a child. And that helps give me some strength in knowing that they truly do understand my pain. And that does help me know that you can carry on somehow. And that's what we do.
And nobody understands that pain. It's like this horrible club, and the initiation into it is just horrific. You just can't relate until you've actually lost a child. They say that's one of the deepest pains anyone can feel, because you never expect your child to go before you.
Right. And I do believe that. I've lost my mom, I've lost a brother. I thought my mom would be my biggest devastation in my life. It doesn't compare to the pain of losing a child.
Do you feel like it was Tommy's time to go, with all those different stories and instances?
Well, as time is going on, and I look back at the times where he didn't go, and even talking with you, it's making me realize more and more that it probably was Tommy's time to go. It doesn't help the pain anymore because he's gone, but it makes me truly realize there was obviously nothing that I could do to save him, because there's so many times that he could have went and he didn't. And this is a time that he shouldn't have went, and he did.
Right.
So I do feel like it was his time to go, and yet God telling me so deep in my soul a couple weeks before he took him that he was going. Yeah, I do believe it was Tommy's time to go.
Doesn't lessen the pain.
No, because I don't believe he knew it was his time to go, and he didn't want to go. That's what's hard.
So what do you hope for Tommy on the other side?
My biggest number one hope is that he can find happiness where he's at, because he was so happy here. And his little boy was the best thing on earth for him. And for him to have to leave him here had to be the worst day of his life. And so I'm hoping that he can find some happiness where he's at. And I hope he can let me know that he has finally found happiness. That's my number one most important thing, is for him to find happiness. The second most important thing for me is for Tommy to be able to stick by his son's side every single day and to help him grow to be the amazing young man that he was here, and guide him to be just like his daddy and somehow always remember him.
Right.
And the last thing for myself, I hope I can find my faith in God again, because I've lost it.
Well, I hope that you find that peace. I don't know that we ever find all the answers that we're looking for this side of the veil. But I do believe that you can find that peace again, and that assurance that Tommy's there and he's okay, and he's watching over little Stetson, and he's watching him grow, maybe even more effectively on the other side than here, which doesn't make you feel any better, I know. But
I hope so.
That's my hope for you. And I also want to just thank you so much for sharing Tommy's story, because I know that's not easy. But I think it will help a lot of people. So many parents that are still angry, that have lost the faith, that didn't feel like it was the right time to go for their child, whatever that time may be. So I think what you're doing here is amazing and very courageous. And before we go, I want you to tell us about this, because I think it's so special.
It is special. This is a molding of our son's hand. We tried to get the specialist to go while our son was in his casket and get a molding of his hand, and she was too busy. She couldn't do it. So my daughter and her friends ran to the store to try to get some stuff to mold his hand, and they got it somewhat of his hand. But then she had a friend that worked for a dentist office said, I can go get his hand. So as he's laying there, she was able to get the molding of his hand, which and it took about a year. She had to keep it in her fridge with keep it cold and keep wet paper towels on it, and then her uncle was able to work on it, and she brought it over after about a year, and it's got his fingernails. It's got it. This
Wow.
is his true molding of his hand. So this is very precious to us.
What an awesome
It is. I
memory.
love it.
Oh yeah.
I look at it, and that big hand matches his big heart.
Yep. And it gives something for Stetson to look forward to as his
Yeah.
little hands
Yeah.
start to grow as he becomes a man like his
Yes.
daddy.
That is so true, and this has been such a pleasure to me. I love talking about our son, never to be forgotten, always in my heart,
Yeah.
every second of every day. And I just hope he can stay by my side.
You will. You
You're
will.
wonderful, and I appreciate the invite
Oh.
and the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I love this. I love you, Jill.
I love you too.
It's pretty cool.